Welcome back to the Dark Reading News Desk here at RSA 2025. Terry Sweeney with Dark Reading, and joining us now is Art Gilliland, CEO of Delinea. Art, thanks so much for joining us on the Dark Reading News Desk.
Yeah, Terry, thanks for having me. So it's
really
my pleasure.
Appreciate you doing this. We are talking about one of the big topics du jour of identity and security, which I think is maybe second only to AI. So we have our work cut out for us.
Excited.
Set some context for us. Talk about some of the biggest identity security challenges that the industry is up against right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of them is actually just visibility and trying to figure out who has access and sort of understanding those. And it's not just your human users, because you tend to provision those.
Right.
But it's now all these machine connections that are happening in your environment. And so part one is sort of understanding where all those are and seeing the landscape, because now you're not only you're on-premise, but you're in cloud and you're SaaS, and all those SaaS applications are connecting. So part of it is that. I think that's probably number one right now for a lot of companies. And then the second is, okay, after I've found it all, now what do I do with it? How do I manage it? How do I enforce policy? How do I deal with that in this sort of distributed hybrid environments that exist in companies' places? So.
Should we expect any formatting changes, or even the management philosophy that accompanies identity and access management? What can you see out on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, so look, I think of identity in sort of three big buckets, and so I'll simplify it because it helps me think about it. Is there's authentication as part of identity, and that's I am Art and I can prove it. That is the domain of the Microsofts and the Googles and Okta to a certain extent in that area. The second area, which is where my company plays, Delinea, is around authorization. So what should Art be allowed to do, and sort of the active delivery of that, what you should be able to do. And then the third area is governance. This is the domain of SailPoints and the Savients and others, which is a workflow around making sure that those privileges and those rights on a periodic basis are updated. I think when you think about it in those ways, companies are looking at, can I do authentication? Is it going to be dial tone at some point, a service? Could it be bring your own? Like LinkedIn could be the way you do that. And so companies are really zeroing in on the privilege delivery or entitlements delivery, which is what should Art be allowed to do in this new world? Some of it I own, some of it's SaaS, some of it's cloud. Is there a way to centralize control over that? And that's a lot of what Delinea is focused on, trying to help companies do.
Okay, thanks. Those are actually some really useful distinctions. With all that in mind, what tips do you have for organizations that have to balance the requirement for robust security or identity security with wanting to make this as seamless for users as possible? Like these are really opposing goals, aren't they?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I think the reality is security has historically always been sort of this cumbersome blocker in the middle of I'm a user, I want to do what I want to do, and security is getting in the way. But if you think about it more, and this is a kind of a tired analogy, but I'm going to use it because I think it's super effective, is, why do cars have brakes? They have brakes so you can go faster. Because if you didn't have, you could only drive like 5 miles an hour. You could go tiny little speed.
Right.
So you need some of these guardrails. The reality, though, is in security software, and you see this in the evolution of software in general, being much more user-friendly, being easier leads to faster adoption. And so security companies that are focused on, and companies that are focused on making the user experience as seamless as possible will have faster adoption. Because if you make it hard for the end user, they will look for ways to cheat.
Sure.
And so I think the priority really needs to be automation, making that seamless, making the connectivity clean, but doing some of the hard work in the behinds to actually secure the connections. And I think that's a big part of sort of the types of work that leading security companies are really focused on trying to do.
Let's cut there, sorry. We're going to probably do that last one again, right?
Yeah,
We're just gonna tell them.
they were really loud.
Quiet down. Yeah. So sorry. Sorry, I think we can do that one again.
Okay.
If we don't, if we have to, we can voice isolate and be totally fine. But if you think you can do it again, that'd be great.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe.
It doesn't have to be exact.
Really? Okay.
You're warmed up now.
You asked your question, and I will.
Yeah.
I will
Good. Okay.
It doesn't have to. We're not trying to match to anything. Don't worry.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
It can be totally
All right.
up.
Yeah. No worries.
Okay. Here we go. 3, 2.
Thanks for that. Those are actually really helpful distinctions to make. With all that in mind, any tips for how enterprises can balance the need for a really robust identity security solution with the competing need to also keep it really frictionless for end users?
Yeah, it's super important to make it easy for the end user, because if you make it hard, they'll try to cheat and they'll try to get around it, and then by default, you'll be less secure. And so I'm going to use an analogy to sort of share, because I think it's a useful one. It's like, why do you have brakes on a car? It's so you can drive faster. Because if you don't have brakes, like you can only go like 2 miles an hour at some point.
Right.
And so security are those brakes on the car. However, you want that to be as integrated into the user experience as possible. And you want to make it so that you don't put a lot of barriers in the way. You want the barriers to be there for protection. You want guardrails. And so I think when you start thinking about, as a security vendor, as you start to build your products, making the user or end user experience as seamless and easy as possible is really the way you drive adoption. And so, companies like ours at Delinea or other security companies, I think if you look at the more modern companies, a lot of the effort is into that UI and that user experience and making the hard stuff happen behind the scenes so that the end user doesn't have to be dragged through every step. And so that's a big part of like modern software development. It's also part of the sort of the modern architectures that companies need to spend a lot of time on thinking about that end user experience, because they'll get better adoption if they do.
Okay. With that, is frictionless authentication from the user side, is that an attainable goal?
I think so. You look at sort of passwordless as part of it. I think what in our world, when you start thinking about rights or entitlements or elevations of privileges, I think there's a part of what you're doing which is easy, and you should be able to do passwordless, and it should be no problem. You can log in, use a thumbprint or some other way to start, and then everything else gets access. And I think you can definitely do that. I think the part where you do need to actually add some friction is, okay, now I want to elevate privileges. I want to do something that's more sensitive. I want to do something more complicated. And you may need to test again. And so, but again, make that as automated, make that as seamless, make that as easy as possible so that you're controlling sort of rings of security. And a lot of what we're trying to do is help easy access for the stuff that is not that dangerous, a little medium access, a little more challenge as you get to the really, and then when you get to the really, really hard sensitive stuff, you want to make sure that person really is who they are, and that they have those rights, and that you're managing and you're monitoring and you're watching what they're doing, because that's when the really dangerous stuff can happen. And so you still want to make that easy so they don't cheat. But at some level you are putting up some boundaries.
Okay. The RSA terms of service, of course, require us to talk about artificial intelligence.
That is the topic du jour that this conference, for sure.
Talk a little bit about, from your perspective, how AI has changed the basics, and we'll get into ransomware and those things. But just again, with just maybe some context about AI's impact in a relatively short time.
Yeah. Look, I think the reality is my dad is talking about AI and he's 82. So the sort of seeping into the general public's idea of what this is, the CEOs, boards are talking about it. And so, of course, our customers are now zeroed in and trying to figure out, what should I do about AI? And that is a big conference conversation at the RSA conference, but it's also a big conversation. I would say I've had it with every customer I've met with over the last 4 months. We're talking at least some section of the meeting about AI. And so why is that? One of the reasons is, if you use it in your business, you are seeing a significant improvement in productivity. It's just straight true. And the stuff that we're doing with AI now is kind of basic. It's a human asking a language model to answer questions, but the volume of productivity impact is high. We built in a feature into our product, which is called Delinea Expert. You can ask it questions. It's trained on my security documentation, all those things. It's literally just trained on my documents, which you could have had access to before. But we've seen a 67% reduction in support calls because of that feature.
Wow.
Huge impact on my business, huge impact on the customer sort of usability of the product. Just this almost transformational for something silly. It's kind of a toy. You sort of think about it that way. That's why companies are pushing to do it. And so when you think about security, using AI within security, there's those kinds of features which add value. But then you also look at sort of, okay, now the company's going to be using these kinds of things all over. Like, how do you secure AI? And so being able to talk to customers about how do you find it, how do you scan for it, and then what do you do about it? I think identity security has a huge role to play in doing that securing of AI, because it's distributed, it's mesh of connections. And so identity is really the way you're going to be able to deal with AI usage. And that's not to mention all the stuff the bad guys are going to do with it.
Of course. It also, I think, bears addressing how enterprises can take full advantage of AI's potential while also staying secure. I'm sure you're inundated with questions about this from customers. How do you respond to them?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think the CISO today really wants to be able to say yes, because there is, like for our business, again, that 67% reduction, like companies are seeing huge value from simple stuff that they're doing with AI. And so the CISO needs to be on the front foot here and say yes. But to do that, you need to put brakes in a car, right? And so if you want to go fast, like what are those guardrails? And I will say the step one is create a policy and do the governance stuff. That has nothing to do with technology. That just has to do with how you think about it. And so companies need to do that. After that, though, how do you find the AI usage? There's the sanctioned AI usage, which you know about. Those will be partnerships. You can deal with identity connections there. You can look at the data sources. You can sort of manage those. But then there's a bunch of what my advisory board calls shadow AI or dark AI, which are these unsanctioned projects. And the businesses might know about them, but the security teams don't. And so how do you find them? How do you scan for them?
Okay.
And so a lot of the technologies that you're hearing about, I think at the RSA conference, even our own announcements around being able to scan your environment, find the connections, determine whether those machine connections are AI related or not related, and then be able to do something. So not just find and create visibility, but now what's the action? Can you vault those credentials? Can you force a rotation? Can you take control essentially of the AI connections? And so that's a lot of the work that we are doing to try to help our customers, but also I think the kinds of things that you're hearing at the RSA conference in general.
All right. Art, take us out with some comments around how Delinea is helping enterprises address and stay ahead of these increasingly sophisticated, complicated attacks.
Yeah, I mean, so Delinea is very focused on identity security in particular, and part of the driver of why that's so important for companies is if you look at the breaches that occur, I would say 8 out of 10, maybe even 9 out of 10 of those breaches have an identity credential theft and elevation of privilege as part of the process. And so taking control of what should Art be allowed to do in the environment becomes critical. And so what we are helping our customers do essentially is see all those interconnections, whether they're a human connection or a machine connection, be able to control those, what they're allowed to do when they are talking to each other, and then take action if they're doing something you don't want them to do, be able to stop it or block it, be able to record it, all those management. And so really giving a company sort of a full view of what is happening and what their users are doing in their environment. And so that's how we're helping. There's obviously a lot of other technologies in the ecosystem that has to work with, but that's the very specific place that Delinea is trying to help our customers be successful.
All right. Well, Art, we so appreciate this fresh cut on identity security. Thank you so much for stopping by the Dark Reading News Desk.
Great, Terry. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
We've been talking with Art Gilliland of Delinea. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us for this segment. We'll see you next time.